Good afternoon, and we are meeting for an extra meeting of the Powys County Council Governance and Audit Committee today on the 5th of March. I will ask Carrie-Anne, please, if she would remind us of any apologies that we have. I'd also like to, I'm not sure if Councillor Gwynfor is with us yet, but Councillor Gwynfor will be joining us for items 7 and 8, and he's very welcome to do so. But Carrie-Anne, please could you give us any apologies?
Yep, so we have received apologies from County Councillor Pete Roberts, officers Diane Reynolds and Marianne Evans, and Audit Wales officer Gareth Jones.
Thank you very much, Carrie-Anne. I'll move us to agenda item 2, which is disclosures of interest. Do any members or attendees have any disclosures of interest in connection with this agenda? Pausing, I'm not seeing any hands, therefore I will move us on to item 3, which is the minutes of our 15th of January meeting, in which we have just noticed that I've been elevated to the role of County Councillor, so I'm sure Carrie-Anne will change that forthwith and put me back to my status as a lay member. Are there any other matters arising or points of correction or clarification that the committee has in connection with the 5th of January minutes? No.
No.
I'll move us on then to our substantive items. And we'll begin with Audit Wales items, and Audit Wales colleagues Emma and Eros will support our discussion of the Audit Wales Q3 work programme and timetable. So Emma, if you'd like to briefly introduce this item, and then we can move to some questions and comments from the committee. Thanks very much, Emma.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so just to update you, obviously this is our quarterly update as at Q3, so it's up to the 31st of December 2024. So I guess it's a little bit out of date now, but it's what we're bringing today to the committee. Our annual audit summary of last year's audit, you'll see, was presented in February 2024. And then in terms of the financial audit work, we've obviously, or you approved the statements for the pension fund and for the council accounts back in November. And then in terms of some grant work for 23-24, it says there that we've got 3 outstanding, but actually since we produced this paper, the teacher's pension has been sent to the Teachers' Pension Authority. So at the moment, there's just the 2 pooled budgets that are outstanding, but they are very near to closure. What I'll do now is I'll hand over to Eros to go through the performance audit progress.
Thanks very much. Eros, over to you, and you're very welcome. Thank you for attending.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Emma, and good afternoon, members. Yeah, the rest of this document provides an update on our performance audit work programme over the 23-24 and 24-25 audit years. So before I delve into those, though, I'll just highlight that we do have 1 report outstanding from our 22-23 programme, and that is our audit looking at the council's arrangements to support the scrutiny function. And as an update on that, we're about to issue a draft report to officers on this with a view to finalising and concluding during the next quarter. Now, in terms of the 23-24 work programme, we're in the process of concluding our review, looking at the council's arrangements to ensure value for money when commissioning services. That was a thematic review. And we've also got the corporate governance review included in the programme for 23-24, as you'll see. Now we're in the process of scoping that review at the moment. We wanted to conclude on our review on scrutiny first, and also being mindful of the other reviews and external inspections going on. And we're looking to confirm the scope and the timetable of that review with the council over the next few weeks now. In terms of 24-25 then, we've undertaken our assurance and risk assessment, which will help to inform our future work programme, but also flowing out of the assurance and risk assessment for this year, we're focusing on risk management arrangements, and we've got a number of interviews scheduled with the council towards the end of this month. Members will see that the thematic review that we had planned looking at staffing and resourcing pressures in local government has been deferred to 25-26. It's a really important area, clearly, for all councils, and the Auditor General has taken a difficult decision to defer that review based on some resource and pressures of our own that we've been facing as we deal with the backlog of work that built up during COVID, but also being mindful of the potential burden on councils as we deal with that backlog as well. But I confirm that it is included in our programme for 25-26, and we'll confirm that in the order plan shortly. And finally, from me, just a note on the national programme, and I guess in particular, the national review looking at capital planning in local government. Colleagues are beginning the fieldwork for that review now on the evidence gathering stage, with Powys included as one of the fieldwork sites for that as well, but that will be concluded on a national basis and very much building up a national picture of those arrangements. That's all from me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much both. I'll invite questions and comments from committee members and other colleagues. John. And then
Thank you,
John,
Chair.
and then Councillor Peake.
I was just checking my microphone was on. Thank you, Chair. The thematic review and staffing resources, it does seem to me to be very, very important that this work is undertaken as soon as possible. Have you any idea when it is going to come up?
We're scoping it at the moment, and we were looking to confirm that scope with the council shortly. But that will, certainly be included in the 25-26 programme, and we will be timetabling that in discussion with the council as well.
Thank you. I would appreciate that it would be done with some urgency. We're having, I think, severe difficulty recruiting and retaining staff in key posts, and I think it's important that this work is done. I know it's not just in Powys, I know it's throughout Wales, and indeed my son, who's the chief executive in the Midlands, is having trouble getting accountants and things, but it's a general problem, but we need to address it. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take that back and certainly feed that back in terms of the agency of the work as well. Thank you.
Thanks, John, and thanks, Eris. Councillor Peake.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Eros, for the presentation. I was looking at the corporate governance review on page 21, and I just wanted to try and understand the mechanics around the scoping, because I think there's one thing, I guess, simplistically to sort of say we've got policies in place and everything's great, but would the scoping also include an opinion on the effectiveness of those policies as well? So I guess the question is who sets the scoping for these reviews?
Thank you, Councillor. I would take that one. We do, is a short answer. But in doing so, we will share draft terms of reference with the council as well, and take on board any feedback that we can. But ultimately, to maintain the independence of the Auditor General and his work, I think we for that reason, we very much set the scope around the reviews that we undertake and the criteria and the benchmark in terms of what good looks like. But certainly in doing that piece of work, we'd look to test out the effectiveness of arrangements as well wherever we can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Pete. Can I just from the chair pick up Councillor Peake's theme on the remits? I think this committee my sense is this committee has a particular interest in the corporate governance review that will be forthcoming. And perhaps this is a comment addressed to senior officers rather than Audit Wales colleagues, but certainly I think given this committee's role and remit and its membership with them 3 lay members or independent members, I as chair, I would like to have sight of the remit of the corporate governance review terms of reference, etc., prior to it being finalised, because I think this committee has a particular interest and a third of the membership are independent. But I don't know whether that's for Audit Wales colleagues to answer or officers to commit to sharing the draft.
I can certainly provide a view from Audit Wales, Chair, and I think that would be just, as I mentioned earlier, really we set the scope in terms of our work, but in doing so, we'll happily have that engagement with the council and discuss with you. That would be primarily from ourselves. That would be primarily through our links in with senior officers.
Mm-hmm.
However, if officers then wish to take on board your views, then that's entirely in your gift, really, to do. So I'll let officers answer that part of it.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just a quick comment from me, if I may. Yeah, I sort of thank you, Chair, for your comments there, and I'd fully endorse that because I think on some of the work we've done recently, it does show our interest in the corporate governance framework, and as I was saying, not only the fact that it's in place, but that it's actually effective. So if we could have some input into those terms of reference, that would be greatly appreciated. So yeah, thank you for that, Chair.
Thanks very much, Pete. I mean, I am very much focused on our core role in terms of governance and assurance, and with reference to our constitutional position in our own terms of reference when I make those comments. I hope that's clear. Are there any further comments for or questions for Audit Wales colleagues on their work programme and timetable? I'm not seeing any hands, therefore I'm going to thank Audit Wales colleagues for the report and move us on to corporate items. And we move into item 5, which is the Treasury Management Report, and Anne and James are with us for this report. So I'll invite James as usual to briefly introduce the report, and then I'll open the floor to questions and comments. James.
Yeah, good afternoon, members. I'm James Chappell. I'm the Capital and Financial Planning Accountant, and we have the Treasury Management Report here up to the end of December, Q3. It's the usual layout, so we talk about investments, mostly held in bank accounts, deposit accounts. We then talk about the capital position, which is has a budget substantially lower than it has been in previous years due to reprofiling. There's a little bit more reprofiling to do, but that's reliant on some external confirmations before we can do that. The amount of borrowing in the programme is set out there in 3.13, so it's 19 million, of which about half of it relates to the housing revenue account. So it's quite lower than we started at the beginning of the year. And then we've got the capital financing requirements, the borrowing requirement estimates and how they've changed throughout the year. We then head on to talk about borrowing, so you can see how the PWRB rates have changed since the beginning of the year, and talks about what we've borrowed and we've repaid during the last quarter, and talks about what we expect to do in the next sort of to the 31st of March. As you can see from the estimates in table 4 on 3.29, our financing costs have increased this year due to the higher interest rates than we were expecting, and they've remained higher and keep remaining higher than we expect. So yeah, there's a little chart in here to show how the interest rate forecasts have changed in 3.32. That shows the forecasts and what the rates have actually done since then as well. Our Treasury Advisors Link, who have now got a new name, MUFG, have provided an updated forecast in February, but that was too late to go into this report when it was drafted. And the usual update from Link is at the appendix of the report. We then talk through the sundry debt and how that's changed over the last in the last quarter. And we've got the usual performance indicators and the VAT KPIs at the end of the report. Don't think I've got anything else further to add there.
Thank you very much, James. Thanks. I'll open up to questions, please. Councillor Pete, please. Followed by Councillor Chris. Pete and then Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, and thanks, James. I had two questions. The first one, James, I was looking at paragraphs 3.4 and 3.6 on page 48, and one of them says we've, I think, saved or made 0.69 million pounds in interest, and I just wondered how that compared to the budget. And then it goes on to say the majority of surplus funds are held in deposit accounts, whereas paragraph 3.6 says we hold no investments. So I just wondered where the extra money's gone. If the surplus is in deposits, is there some money held somewhere else? Sorry, I just confused reading those two.
Yeah, no problem. I suppose when I've said that the authority has no investments, it has no investments out with other parties apart from banks. I probably need to clarify that situation. It does hold money in, but it holds any surplus cash in its deposit accounts. But therefore it doesn't have any investments. We do occasionally lend to other authorities as they lend to us. So at the 31st of December, we did not have any loans out with other local authorities. And when we talk about the budget, there is an overspend against the budget as it stands based on the higher interest costs. That is reduced by we're receiving higher levels of income based on the surplus funds we're holding just for cash flow purposes. But there is I think it's about £1.5 million overspend on interest paid and MRP during anticipated at the end of the year based on these much higher borrowing costs than we were anticipating.
Could I just ask a follow-up on that, Chair, for me?
Yes, of course, Pete.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, James, just so as I'm clear then. So we don't have any investments. All the funds we have are in deposit accounts. So just wanted to check that if my understanding of that was right. And then sorry, James, then these funds have earned us interest totaling 0.6 million. And I just wondered how that compared to budget.
Okay, so we have been lending to other local authorities during the month. I think we've done three this year, but we generally have them back in for the end of the month to cover payday because that's our most expensive day of the month. So therefore, at the 31st of March, we did not, but we have had some during the year. So we haven't budgeted for the last couple of years for any income from interest received. So anything above anything above zero is an improvement on our budget. So I think that covers your question, hopefully.
Yeah. No, thank you, James. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pete. Thank you very much, James. I did have Councillor Chris's hand. It seems to have disappeared, so I'm going to go to Councillor Graham. And if Councillor Chris does want to ask a question, let me know.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, James, for the presentation. I'd like to just ask a question on 3.22 regarding the Public Works Loans Board. I had read this before, but just reading it now, I note that there are some concerns expressed in there about the future purchases of assets for yield, which may be affected by this our inability to borrow from the Public Works Loan Board. I just wonder if you could elaborate a little bit more on that to explain what effect that could possibly have on the council going forward in terms of its budgets for the following year.
Yeah, so this is just a narrative, just explaining that we're not allowed to do it. I can't say the word. There is no plans to put anything in the capital programme that is purely for yield. There are various things in the SIPFA's prudential code about not borrowing purely for yield, as a lot of authorities in England have done, and it's got them into issues. This is purely stating that could be a problem if we do start to do that. Generally, it's mainly for service delivery or for regeneration purposes. Our capital borrowing is for, and but if we were, we'd have to look to other places apart from the PWLB, which would be other local authorities or banks, which would have a different rate. It may be higher, it may be lower, we don't know, but I would imagine it's higher than the PWLB rates.
Okay. Thank you, James. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thanks both. Councillor Chris, did you want to come in?
Yes, if I could, Chair. I
Right,
put
so
my
I'm going to
hand
go
up
to
and it keeps on
Councillor Chris,
taking it down.
then John, and then Councillor Pete.
Thank you, James. A helpful report. First of all, I'm just going to go back to page 54. Just bear with me. On the page 54, you've got the sundry debt on there. The paragraph above says that obviously sundry debt has increased to 15.57 million. And that doesn't include council tax arrears. Is that something we should be worried about?
Obviously, the more debt that isn't paid, especially age debt over 30 days, the less income the council's having in. So yes, it is a concern, but of course it is something that we manage up and down over the year, depending on how debts are raised, when they're paid by people, and what type of debt it is as well. It's not all. There could be things for certain specific items that take longer to recover than other bits of debt. So yes, it's a concern. It's higher than the last quarter, but I think, as you can see with the trends, probably the trend more than a quarter to quarter jump is to be more concerned. But yeah, it is a bigger jump than we'd like. Obviously, we'd like it as low as possible.
Okay. So then if I'm looking at that trend table below in table 5, obviously the adult services trend line seems to have accelerated up quite a bit over that period of time. What I'm trying to see is whether, again, are we out of kilter in consideration to other councils because they would be providing this similar types of service, or is it something that's unique to Powys because of our age profile?
I don't think I can answer that specifically. I don't have the knowledge, but if we look in 3.48, the table, you can see the PTHB debt has gone up. No, it hasn't. It's gone the other way around. I was looking at the wrong columns. Apology, ignore my sentence there.
Okay.
But it's the non-PTHB debt has increased. I'm not sure if Mary can add anything there on the other councils.
Mary, do you want to come in?
Yes, if that's okay, thanks, Chair. We haven't done any detailed benchmarking with other councils. Like you say, our age profile is, we do have more older people than a lot of other authorities. But I wouldn't say at this point that this is a Powys only issue. But we haven't done that specific benchmarking. It's something we can look into.
Okay. It would be interesting, particularly if we were looking at some of the rural communities, because I believe our age profile is slightly different to others, and I think that could be factored in accordingly on this. So it's just an observation. The other question I had is, you've got on that table other, and I just was looking through to see what was other, and I couldn't see any definition of it. I mean, it's virtually flat line, but I just wanted clarification of what that was for.
Off the top of my head, I can't answer, but perhaps if we take an action, I'll come back to you with what it is, a breakdown by looking at the actual report with the debt on it. I'm sorry.
Okay,
Thanks, Jane.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks, Chris. I'm just going to pause. Jane, did you want to come in and respond to any of the discussion, or do you want to come in? Yeah, yes, right. I'll bring Jane in, and then I've got John, Councillor Pete, and then Councillor William.
Thank you, Chair. No, it's just in response to some of the questions raised. I mean, in terms of debt levels, an increase in the level of debt overall is not always a bad thing. It just shows that the authority is raising as much income as it possibly can. So in one respect, seeing debt levels rise is good. However, the way you manage that debt and ensure that you recover it as soon as possible obviously is a different factor, isn't it? And making sure that we get that funding in on a timely basis is absolutely critical. So while some headlines may look like we're increasing our levels of debt, the factors to really keep an eye on is the age of that debt and how quickly we're getting it in. So I think this has been an area we've tried to develop to give people that better understanding in these reports. But we're also doing an awful lot across the council to raise the transparency with services about their levels of debt. And I'm sure Mary will pick up at some point a little later about the dashboards that we're now using. But that will help us much better to review that outstanding debt and decide what needs to be done about it in terms of that recovery process. So it was a general comment really, but I just wanted to re-emphasize that.
Thanks, Jane. Thank you. John, and then Councillor Pete, and then Councillor William.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two or three questions, actually. The first one is, if we could look at page 50, I recognise this is a photograph in time, but it does show the 50-year bond rates as being somewhere around 5.6, 5 points, in excess of 5.6% anyway. I looked up the rate earlier this week, and it's now probably less than 4.6. In other words, a drop of a full percentage point. Does that affect our strategy for debt restructure at all?
We've continued to keep, as you can see with the forecast laid further on in the report, the rates are expected to fall. So we really tried to keep to sort of 12-month or 2 to 3 year borrowings at the longest time frame, so as we're in a position to borrow at a lower rate in future when those debts mature. So we're not locked in for longer periods. So a lot of our debt is sort of 1 to 2 years at most.
Yes. Is that trend graph still valid? Are they still sticking by that prediction, given the uncertainty in the world at the moment?
When Link or MUFG revised their forecast in February, they expected it to climb in March, which it has done, and then they're expecting it to tail off. But of course, it is so volatile.
Yes, I accept that.
They could do a forecast every day, so that they'll probably give it another month or so and do another forecast. But they are expected to tail down, perhaps not to the levels we were expecting sort of 12 months ago, or definitely not to the levels we were expecting 12 months ago.
So you're not thinking of changing your strategy in the near future then?
No, we're going to continue to go for the.
Yeah. Okay, understood. The second question is, I did mention last time we had a Treasury report here. I'm going back to the debt table on page 54. The highways, transport and recycling debts have gone up, and I see it's not come down. In fact, it's gone up a tad more. You were going to look at that and see what was involved there.
So the highways debt last quarter was to do with street works and bonds that we hold, wasn't it? That those bonds weren't paid over at the time, so they were aged debts.
Right.
That was why we had a jump last quarter, to the end of quarter 2. I don't off the top of my head know what's happened, why it's jumped up a little bit in quarter 3, but I can certainly have a look for you. And
it's not gone down. One would have expected at some point that it would come down. Are we expecting a lot of this to come down before the year end?
It really depends on when they pay them, but things like the bonds, with obviously they can't do their work until we've received the bonds. So
Right.
there's no great risk there, I don't think.
There isn't any risk.
No.
Okay. And my last point, if I may, for Jane, on page 55, there's a paragraph there with the last bullet point. A new finance system will be in place from April 26. It's important we housekeep our balance sheet in order to only transfer over the appropriate balances and transactions. But this sort of cleansing is quite common. Are you expecting, as a result of this, in-depth look at the debts, any substantial write-offs to be incurred, Jane?
I can pick up on that, and I think this is probably the time to set out what we've done in terms of helping services manage this debt more effectively. And that is we've introduced over the last couple of months a new finance dashboard that gives services oversight in a different way of many of these financial factors. So it's a report that routinely is updated in terms of debt. Services can then delve down into the detail through this dashboard, and they have much better visibility in one place of all that outstanding debt. I know there is a focus now from services reviewing all of this. I know from my own directorate, we've had quite an extensive look at particularly the age debt. What is it? Is it something that we should be considering for write-off, and so on and so forth? So I think we're likely to see some level of write-off as a result of some of this review work. But of course, we do have a significant level of provision on the balance sheet anyway in terms of potential bad debt write-off. So we would draw on that. So it wouldn't, having that provision in place, we've already made that provision for that write-off of debt. I don't think we wrote off anything significant last year. I would suspect that it may be a little bit higher this year as a result of the review, but we can report on that. And of course, we've got quite a firm debt write-off policy in terms of when you consider debt appropriate for write-off, and we will be following that and the governance around that before any write-offs are actually actioned.
Thanks, Jane. I don't know about you, Chair, but I'd like to see these dashboards in a bit more detail, perhaps at a future meeting when we've got something to actually report and show.
We would, obviously, the level of detail in those reports are very detailed.
Yeah.
So I think we would be able to share some of it, but not necessarily all of it because of the GDPR requirements, obviously.
It's the methodology I'm more interested in than the.
I'm sure we could demo some of the high level stuff so that you can see it.
Yeah, a demonstration would be extremely helpful, but we do understand about the confidentiality and privileged information. I'll bring in Councillor Pete and then Councillor William.
Thank you, Chair. So I did have one question. I've got two now, if I may. Thinking back to again on the interest point, I was looking at paragraph 3.12, which I think the commentary says interest cost has been reduced. But then if I go to paragraph 3.31, it says we're paying £275,000 more in interest. I was just after a bit of explanation or clarification on that one before I ask my other question, if I could, Chair.
Yes, so the 3.12 explains how we plan to fund the capital programme. And so obviously the options we have is specific grants for schemes or contributions from revenue or capital receipts, which are sales from assets, and all else fails, we then have to go to borrowing. Obviously, we started off the year with quite a substantially larger capital programme, and we've managed to reduce the levels of borrowing we expected to fund the capital programme in year. That will have saved us money because we're not having to borrow to fund schemes in the capital programme, which is at odds then with later on in report, because what we've had to borrow has been more expensive than we expected to borrow it at. So whilst there has been a saving or a reduction in the amount we've had to borrow, what we've had to borrow is more expensive. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, James. Yeah, I understand that. Thank you. And then the other question, I guess, is a bit related to debt and paragraph 3.5, which talks about council tax collection rates. And I think we're showing there we've collected about 80% of the council tax. Is that impacted by people paying via direct debits? So that's actually the cash flow figure rather than there being 20% outstanding?
The council collects various mechanisms, doesn't it? People pay, people collect by direct debit. They do encourage to pay in 10 installments, isn't it? 10 or 11 installments. So as the debt is paid, the council tax is paid earlier during the year. Hence why we've got an 80% collection rate 3/4 of the way through the year. If it was on par, it would be a 75% collection rate, isn't it? So that kind of encouragement for people to make earlier installments and then almost get a free month. I know it's not really a free month in February and March. But yeah, that contributes to that rate being higher there.
Yeah, so I shouldn't necessarily be ringing an alarm bell that 20%'s uncollected, because we should still get another 3 months worth of direct debits installments coming in.
Yeah, we got 25% more of the year to go, haven't we?
Yeah, although that'll be good because then we'll get 105% of council tax. But yeah, I understand the point, James. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks
Jen.
very much, Councillor Pete. Thanks very much, James. Councillor William.
Diolch, David. Thank you very much. And please excuse my voice, which is a bit erratic, and I'm in recovery, early recovery from a sort of fluid cold and stuff. So apologies for that. Could John's questions around the volatility of the world scene currently has sort of anticipated some part of my question. I was going to ask James whether we need to make provision, given the volatility of world markets and so on, for any additional input and expert advice in that regard. I know certain types of concerns that we would normally be investing in are suddenly looking less favorable, and other organizations, particularly armaments industries, have had a major surge in the last few days in the light of development. So it's an area that John is far more appropriate to lead on than me, given his grasp of the issues. But I wondered whether we may need to make some additional provision for us to review our overall strategy in with greater regularity. My other question arises out of the reference in the report to the debt working group. I wanted to inquire, and it's not a group that whose work I've come across previously, as to what the makeup of that group is, and also whether there is an officer member dimension to that, or whether it's officer only, and finally whether the debt recovery officer that's referred to has actually successfully been recruited, because it's obviously a key role, and whatever team that individual belongs to is going to be pretty busy, I suspect, in the time to come. So thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you very much, Councillor William. Good questions. James and Jane. James in the first instance.
Yeah, I'll pick up the first question. We continue to liaise with our Treasury Advisors link group on all matters, whether that's investments or borrowing, and we are trying to borrow as little as possible. The capital program for next year was reviewed as part of the budgets, and that has been, I think, squeezed down as much as we can, as Jane would say. So as we've reduced our exposure to the risk of interest rates, and reduced the level of borrowing we've got. Obviously, we've got some debt maturing, and we will look at each point of when we need cash. We don't necessarily replace the debt immediately. We replace it when we need cash to maintain, I don't want to say liquidity, but to make sure we've got enough cash for our day-to-day needs, because there's no point in having a load of money in a bank account and a load of money and borrowing at a higher rate. So we try and get a balance between the two.
Yeah.
But yeah, we continually talk with our treasury advisors to see what's going on and to see
Thanks
where
on
we
that.
are.
And so the issue of the debt recovery team and that specific staff appointment was that was the other point, wasn't it?
Mary, are you coming in on that point? You're still on mute.
There we are. Sorry, that took a little while then. Yes, is that okay? Yes. So yes, we've appointed to that debt recovery officer role. He has started. Obviously, there's a bit of a training and bringing up to speed
Really,
in the early weeks, but yes, he's started and is keen to be looking at specifically the social care debt and working with the social care team on that. You also asked about the debt recovery working group. That is an internal officer working group, pulling together sort of the debt recovery team officers, but also finance team officers as well, to try and tackle some of the older debt and looking at some of that age debt that we've got and develop different strategies for different departments, different age debts. So, and working along with the services as well when we're looking at that.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. I just think it would be useful if members could be kept apprised of that work and potentially the anti-poverty champion and obviously the portfolio holder, Sir David Thomas, kept particularly in the loop on any learning points from that work. But thank you for clarification.
Thank you very much. I was just going to draw it to a close, but I will give Councillor David the last word.
Yeah, just very briefly, Chair, just to reassure Councillor William that I do get updated on all aspects of financial work through performance meetings, etc., etc. So thank you for that, team.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for those assurances, Councillor David, and thanks very much to James for your report. As always, it's a really high quality report which generates a lot of interest, and thank you to everyone for their interest in this report and for their questioning. So if there are no further points, I'm moving us on to agenda item 6, which is the Q3 Strategic Risk Management Report, and I'm going to ask Bets to briefly introduce the report and then open the discussion to questions from members and comments. Bets.
Afternoon. Just to double check, I believe I'm happy to do the report, but I believe Councillor David is here and was going to present.
I'm happy either way, Councillor David, Bets, whoever wants to introduce the report.
I can certainly introduce it if you wish, Chair. Bets, whichever. I did introduce it at Cabinet, so it might be appropriate if I introduce it, not at Cabinet, at Cabinet CLT. Right, so this is the Strategic Risk Register report for Q3. As at the end of Q3 24-25, there are 15 risks on the Strategic Risk Register, and all strategic risk owners have provided a short summary of progress since last quarter. At Appendix A, we've got the 15 strategic risks, including the mitigating actions identified. Appendix B shows the heat map for a visual representation of the risks. At 3.5, we've got some risks that have been requested for de-escalation, and they're in adult services and in income and awards. There's an escalation of a risk to the Strategic Risk Register at 3.8 from education services. The details are outlined in the report, so I presume that you'll have read all those, members. With regard to the resource implications, there are no direct resource implications in relation to this report. However, all risk owners need to consider the resource implications of managing the risk and decide if the best course of action is to tolerate or treat. Thank you, Chair. That's just a brief high-level introduction to the report.
Thank you very much, Councillor David, much appreciated. You're quite right to assume that everyone will have read the report. which we're very grateful for. I will open to questions from committee members, and then I know Councillor Gwynfor is here also for this item, so just Councillor Gwynfor, your contribution will be welcome if you choose to make a comment or whatever as we go through. So I'm seeing Councillor Pete, and then I'm seeing Councillor Chris. So Councillor Pete and then Councillor Chris, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at two particular risks, actually. One's on page 77, EDR 0011. The other's on page 83, which is HTR 018, I think. I note that both of these focus on sort of climate and nature emergency, and was declared as obviously Paris was concerned about the impact of not taking actions on things like poor air quality and the impact on nature and our communities. So I just wanted to ask whether this should actually be re-rated, or whether we need to reconsider the ratings following the recent potential detrimental impacts, on both environment and community from the increased charges coming into effect for dumping rubbish, the green collection charges, and the introduction of the booking system for household waste recycling centres. Because I guess I was just thinking one could possibly argue that that two potential things there have helped to crystallise one of the potential consequences listed on the register, where the council's reputation is hurt by lack of prevention planning and being perceived to be a contributor. So I just wondered if that would be considered for re-rating. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pete. Can I go to Matt? Yeah, Matt, if you'd like to give an initial thoughts to that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's just important to note that these risk registers are taken at a point in time. So do take on Councillor Pete's comments around whether these would change potentially going forward in terms of the climate and the impact that it's having. As we know that the council did declare a climate emergency, and our team are making strides to try and obviously improve this and reduce our carbon output. But obviously we've got to manage that against quite challenging budgets going forward. So there is that balance. Specifically on the point of the charging for the DIY waste, that is something that we will monitor going closely. We've got no evidence to suggest that that is the case at the moment. So until that comes in, we'd have to review it. I'm aware of other authorities who are doing similar, and I've had that reaction from it. But I do take Councillor Pete's point, and we will monitor that situation and then obviously review the risk register in line with that going forward.
Thank you very much, Matt. Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Chris next, and then John.
Thank you, Chair. It's in relation to the WICSA risk on the so ASC 0064. This has been on this register for a little while. We keep on getting given assurances that things are progressing. I just wanted to know where we're at really with the data cleansing. How much more have we got to do, and when is the system going to be revealed to see what it looks like? Because to say that it's just progressing doesn't necessarily give you the assurances that is required. And I know I've asked this in other committee structures and that on there, and I'm sure Nina will be able to provide me with the assurances that required, because I am concerned about partnership working, the continuation of care, and the managing of risk appropriately.
Thank you very much, Chris. And I can see Nina's hands already up, so you're welcome, Nina. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Nina Davis, Director of Social Services and Wellbeing. And thank you, Councillor Chris, for your questions and your interest in what is obviously for social services a really key priority for us. So thank you. Obviously, what you've got in front of you today is the Q3 strategic risk report. So it isn't a full update on the work that's been happened and undertaken. And the risk is around the current system as well. But of course, part of the mitigation in terms of the current system is that we are moving to a new system. So absolutely appreciate that. You'll note within the Q3 risk update that there is an implementation plan going to be put together for moving to a new system, and that's going to be completed and agreed in Q4. I can tell you that those final contract negotiations and that implementation plan are on course and are proceeding well. And I expect to have those completed and signed off by mid-March, so within the next couple of weeks. I'm sure you will all understand this is a public meeting here, and there are commercially sensitive and confidential details that I obviously can't go into, and that wouldn't be appropriate. However, what I can share with you is the costs of that new system are lower than anticipated, and that the implementation plans that are being worked up at the moment are well within the timescales that we require. I can also share that we have, along with all other local authorities across Wales, we've put in a request for funding and support from Welsh Government, and we expect to have a response to that request very shortly as well. My thanks really do go to staff across social services because, as you say, Councillor Chris, there's a huge amount of work ongoing at the moment about that data cleansing. I'm sure you all appreciate that moving between two computer systems is a really significant piece of work. And of course, with social services and the data that we're talking about, it's absolutely critical that we get that right. And all of that pre-work that we're doing in terms of that is going to really pay dividends when we go into implementation and making sure that that happens smoothly. So real thanks to all of the staff that are doing that. And I just want to say huge thanks to ICT and digital staff as well, who've been absolutely fantastic supporting with us. Now, I know that this is something that you as a committee will want more detail on, and rightly so. And I think we've got an agenda item at your meeting on the 8th of May. I think we're on the agenda for the 8th of May to come back here and to give you that more detailed update and assurance, Councillor Chris. And just to let you know, we're also on the agenda for health and care scrutiny on the 9th of April to give an update on that's the move to the new system as well. So hopefully Councillor Chris will be able to go into that level of detail and assurance that I know you absolutely want to seek. And also in terms of just risk, if I may, Chair, just to note that we will be reviewing this risk now in Q4. We've got a review meeting booked in. It's either in March or very early April. So just to let you know that that is happening as well. But if there's any other questions, I'll do my best to answer them, Chair, but thank you.
Thanks very much, Nina. That's really appreciated because I think you're well aware of this committee's interest and the assurance that we've been seeking around this really important matter for the authority and not least the people we serve. Councillor Chris, I would just want to check in with you that Nina's answer is sufficient for the time being.
It is. I'm glad we've got a little bit more of a clarification of timeline. Likewise, I acknowledge the hard work and efforts that go into doing data cleansing. I've been in similar situations in previous roles, so I do appreciate that, and it is thanks to our staff who are our greatest asset that actually delivered the services. So thank you for that update. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Nina, and thank you, Councillor Chris, for your question. John.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two queries, if I may, that both involve the changes to the content of the Strategic Risk Register. The first one is the de-escalation of the social care providers' failure risk. My question really is, as I understand it, one of the biggest problems the care homes face at the moment is the imposition of the increased national insurance and national insurance changes. And as I understand it, councils where they're directly employing people are going to be compensated, at least in England, and some sort of money going to the Welsh Government to do something similar. because we're not sure how this any money that's going to come to Powys would then find its way to the care providers, are we a bit premature in de-escalating this risk?
Thanks, John. Who can
That's the
take
first
this?
point. I'll
Oh,
take
sorry.
the one later, if I may.
Right, okay, I was going to look to perhaps a combination of Jane and Nina to answer that, and then I'll go back to you, John, for your second point.
Yeah.
Nina, are you going to go first?
Yeah, happy to. Thank you,
And then-
Chair. And thank you for the question, John. I'm sure Jane will come in the detail of in terms of the national insurance implications on that. She will have the closer to the detail on in terms of that. But in terms of the de-escalation of this risk, it's something we've had a really good discussion and a lengthy discussion about. This risk was very much escalated, you know, in terms of COVID and that kind of period of time for very, very obvious reasons. But what we found is that we are managing within the service the risk, and we're working with service providers. We've got mitigation actions in place that we think are robust now to kind of support, but also the risk of a failure is reducing as we've been able to do a lot of work supporting additional providers into the dom care market, for example, increasing the hours available there to support. So it's a really good challenge, John. Thank you so much for the challenge on it. It was something that we have thought about, but at the moment we feel that that risk is appropriate to be reduced and de-escalated at this current time. But risks are, you know, and risk registers are reviewed regularly for very obvious reasons. And if things change, then, you know, we would be reviewing that again in the future.
Thanks, Nina. Jane, can you pick up the NI and the funding points, please?
Yeah. So John is right. We haven't had any detailed information as to the level of funding that we can expect. Those discussions are still continuing at a Welsh Government and Treasury level too. So in terms of understanding the impact for us as a council, our initial calculations estimate that those costs for both our own direct staff, but also those for providers that we work with as well, is around £6 million per annum, if not more, on an annual basis. So we have considered those elements within the budget that was approved by council back last week. Time is going so quickly, I'm not sure when it was. And we have factored in what we feel is an appropriate level in terms of those elements, but we will wait to hear what level of funding we will actually get and how that is likely to be allocated to councils across Wales too. So still quite an unknown in terms of that, but we've made reasonable assumptions within the budget that's been approved.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks, thanks, Nina. John, is that a sufficient answer for the time being? And would you like to move on to your
I think it's the only answer that can be given for the time being, really. But yes, let's wait and see. Watch this.
Yeah, it'll be good to know come the once clarification comes from central government. John, you had a second question.
Yes, the second one was the escalation of the education risk and standards of school leadership and teaching and learning decline in Powys schools. My problem with this, I know it's an extremely important issue, and I know it needs to be discussed widely and as fully as possible, but I don't think this is the appropriate place for it. It is not a risk. It's something which has actually happened and has been happening over the years, and it goes back years to Eru and the improvements from there. My other concern with this presentation is it's come up to us to consider it as a corporate risk, but without any scores attached and without any mitigations, current mitigations that are there. I'm worried about having it on this and us being the sole arbiters of, or potentially a key arbiter in assessing this problem. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And before I bring in Bets and any other officers, I I'd want to just also tease out the context, the wider context of the Eston review, which we're aware has been undertaken, and to seek assurance that this risk ongoing will be reviewed in that context once the Eston report has landed and can be made public and including shared with this committee. I can see Bet's hand up and I can see Anwen's hand up, so I'll go to Bet's first and then Anwen.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the easy part and leave the heavy lifting for Anwen. Just to assure you that we do have the ratings and we do have the mitigation against the risk. That detail's actually in JCAD. I'm happy to go through that with you now as enlisted, or we if you were to escalate, we could email it out at a later point. Would you like me to list the 4 mitigating actions now?
Yes, I think it'd be useful.
I think it would be, yeah.
Okay, I have them open. So mitigation, we have provide targeted support and resources to schools identified by Estin to help them improve their standards. With number 2, invest in professional development programs for teachers and school leaders to enhance their skills and teaching methodologies. 3, encourage collaboration between schools, sharing best practice and successful strategies to improve overall support performance. And finally, 4, implement a robust monitoring and evaluation system to track the progress of schools and ensure that the improvements are sustained over time. And just to add, we do have a rating of 12 with the probability of likely and the moderate of 3 as of today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bex. John, did you want to say anything before I bring
I was just
in?
going to comment on those mitigations. I mean, those words or words that are very similar have been used now for some considerable time in terms of education improvement, and we are not actually seeing the improvement we should be seeing if those mitigations were successful.
Thank you. Thanks, John. We'll note that comment, and I'll ask Anwen to come in and address the wider points.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Thank you, Chair. So I'm Anwen Orwells, the Head of School Improvement and Learning. So if I give you some context so that people can understand why this was escalated to a corporate risk so quickly. So as some of you may be aware, I came into position in June, and one of the big areas of my work immediately was to undertake the really important, significant work indeed of identifying the strengths and our areas for development across Power Schools and the education service. And one of the significant risks that we have actually been discussing at our quarterly reporting since June, which would have been Q2 onwards, and escalated then to corporate CLT level and the council assurances processes, is our significant concern that over the years, as you mentioned, John, that Power's inspection outcomes there's nothing else to say, but have been poor, especially the increase in recent years of the number of secondary and all-age Power schools going into a category. And unfortunately, more recently, the primary schools also going into category. So we did feel, and after significant discussions with our portfolio holder and other colleagues, we were very, very concerned about the issues that this would raise and the significant concerns which incorporate learner outcomes. We're really worried about the experience that some of our learners may experience. And of course, their education, they only have one chance at education. And really, we value that element and want to make sure that every Powers learner gets the best possible chance in life. On a corporate and a whole county level, we're concerned about the reputation, about the significant potential negative impact of Powers's Estin profile for our parents and carers, our learners and our stakeholders. Also, for every school that goes into a category, the resource allocation is significant. because any school that goes into category inevitably attracts additional funding. So we're very concerned about the increase in those schools going into category, perhaps potentially diverting from other schools or from other corporate areas of the council. And our staff morale, and when I say our staff, I mean school staff, the leaders, our teachers, and our staff across our schools, and indeed our service, with that increased pressure giving us significant recruitment and retention risks. So coupled with those 4 significant risks, which we felt were really corporate level risks, and the need for that significant sustainable long-term improvement, from discussions with our portfolio holder in our quarterly reporting and then escalating it higher, it was felt that probably the accountability, and I perhaps shouldn't say this, but holding me, Richard, the director, and Marianne, the other head of service, to account to ensure that we do have sustainable long-term school improvement for our Powys schools.
Thank you very much, Anwen, for being so candid in your commentary. Thank you.
And sorry, Chair, one thing you did ask right at the very beginning, just so that everybody's aware that the Estin report is due for publication on Friday, the 21st of March.
Thank you very much.
Date the publication.
Yep, so it'll be the public domain on the 21st. Yeah, good. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm just going to pause there and invite any further questions from the committee. I'm going to pause again and just Councillor Gwynfor, the chair of Learning and Skills Scrutiny, is with us, and I just wanted to give Councillor Gwynfor the opportunity to say something should he wish. He doesn't have to, but I want the opportunity to be available should Councillor Gwynfor wish to make any comment.
Yeah, the objective of today's meeting was to come in and just observe, and I was interested to see if there was any comment being made on it, which there has, and I'm grateful for that. I'm still confused a little bit with John on this in relation to that corporate governance. I don't think the narrative reads well in the document, because it says it's being placed on the register to make sure the cabinet are aware of this. And Anwen says about accountability, it's suggesting that the cabinet needs to have accountability with it as well. This has obviously been on the Learning and Skills Committee for some time now, and the Learning and Skills Committee wrote to the leader and the portfolio in relation to this, because we shared the concern which the register is expressing. The one point which hasn't been made today, and that risk, and it's not mentioned in the risk, is there a linkage between the budget in relation to schools and school standards? And that's what I find very worrying in relation to this risk.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gwynfor. I'm not going to ask colleagues to respond to your comments, but they have been noted, and I think it's important that you had the opportunity to attend today and make those observations, and I assume that those considerations will be taken forward through Cabinet and through corporate leadership group to articulate and address this risk in an appropriate way going forward, and in the light of the Estin report when it becomes in the public domain at the end on the 21st of March. So I think there will probably be further discussion in many fora across the council on this risk going forward. So I think for today and for the purposes of Governance and Audit Committee, we'll leave it there for just now. But it's undoubtedly a conversation, and a very important conversation, that will be continued in the coming weeks and months. So I will therefore move us on to agenda item. Oh, perhaps, sorry, I should just pause. Are there any other questions on the comments or questions on the strategic risk register? No. I'll move us on to item 7, and we are going to receive a short presentation on Schools Capital Programme, Modern Methods of Construction from Jim Swaby. Have I pronounced your name properly?
You
Or
have, thank you, Chair.
correct me? Hmm?
You have, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll hand over to you, Jim, to explain the context and to deliver your short presentation.
Lovely, thank you very much. So, yeah, my name's Jim Swaby. I'm a professional lead for property design services within the council. Joined this afternoon by Matt Curtis, who's within the Schools Modernisation Programme, Schools Transformation Team. Is my presentation sharing at the moment?
Yes. It is.
Thank you. Okay, so it's very short. It's effectively the presentation I made to CLT last week. I've taken out some of the commercial aspects, given the public arena. It's here to sort of give an indication of direction of travel. It's not a finished statement by any event, but it will provoke conversation and further discussion, I'm sure, Chair, in due course. So. Okay, so I'm going to start off with a few definitions and a little bit of background. So modern methods of construction is also known as design for manufacture and assembly. They're pretty much synonymous. They refer to non-traditional construction technologies. And to that extent, it's quite an old concept. It goes back a long way. It's post-war, really. Timber frame buildings would be considered modern methods of construction. There are a number of others, and there's 7 categories of they're grouped together. Each focus on factory processes, and these vary considerably. So these are 3 sort of techniques or technologies that are applied within the MMC arena. So the top there's a wall panel being craned onto site. That's a prefabricated wall, which has got an external skin and internal skin, windows and insulation, and that's just built in the factory and craned in, so you're reducing a lot of site-based time on that. To the top right, you've got that's the 13th floor of a 26-story block of flats being craned in. So the pod there, the module there, is a volumetric offsite construction that's being stacked around an in-situ concrete core, and a high degree of repetition going on here, good efficiencies being borne out. And the bottom right, there's a factory that's creating shower pods that might be installed within student accommodation, for example. Again, a very high degree of industrialization possible here, some good efficiencies on it. And the drivers really are improving the quality, because you've got factory assembly, weather's not an issue. You're improving safety because it's under very controlled conditions, and you can get greater confidence around delivery times. Consequence of that, you're reducing waste, and there are efficiencies which come down to reduce costs, although I think it's important to be aware that it's not a sort of 2 for the price of 1 cost reduction. It's percentage reductions and percentage savings. There's an interesting concept here, pre-manufactured value, which is the amount of building that's manufactured off-site. And the higher the percentage, the more efficient it's considered to be by virtue of those savings being drawn into it. I'll come back to that in a minute. And if we're adopting MMC, then we have to revise our approach to contracting, because each technology has a different contractor, or rather each contractor has their own preferred technology. They're all providing different solutions, and none of them are MPOWES, or at least very few suppliers are with MPOWES. I'll come back to that again as well. And we will need early contractor involvement, ECI, because of this particularity of solution, and partnering contracts are recommended, which is a slightly different way of approaching things. That's a consequence of it. Oh, sorry, Chair, I'm happy to take questions as we go through if you like, or wrap up at the end, but I'll go through at pace if that's okay.
Thanks very much, Jim. Just carry on, and if anyone wants to ask a particular question, they can raise their hand, and we can do it as we go along.
I will do. Thank you. So in terms of the drivers for change, what POWES is really looking for is improved value for money. There's concern over the increasing and high capital cost of new schools build, and this initiative is to look to see how we can get the best value for money here. It's also to look to reduce the time spent in product delivery, although, as I'll show you in a minute, much of the process will take exactly as long. All the statutory process is the same, irrespective of the construction technology applied, but nonetheless, there are advantages to be had. Also looking for a simplified and standardized design, one that can apply across the council. So we're reducing design time, and we're adopting a POWER standard rather than an individual head teacher standard. Some schemes have been quite particular, and that's not necessarily advantageous when staff move on. Finally, the greater contractual certainty aligns with some of our experiences recently within the Sustainable Community Learning Programme, Schools Transformation Programme. We have had difficulties in recent years with project delivery. I think that's Powys and other rural authorities have had difficulty. We're at the end of a supply chain. Contracting in the last few years has been very difficult post-COVID, post-Ukraine. And all the inflationary pressures have made project delivery rather tricky. So this is, again, part of that. These are the things we're trying to solve. We need to be clear of a number of factors here. We need to understand what the energy standard is, and it's absolutely certain we'll be clearing the Welsh Government requirement, but what's the appropriate standard to be aiming for? Then we've got wider quality standards. So 6-year design life is kind of as a given, but there are within that, there's certain ways of approaching it. We know that modern methods of construction require early sign-off, and deviating from that is problematic. And we may also require advance payment, which is has implications. It's not something the authority would readily do. And finally, on this one, the local spend may be hard to achieve. If we're buying units built out of county or maybe out of country, then the local spend becomes groundworks substantially. So against all of this, it's really understanding what our success criteria are as we go into a tendering operation. And that's not quite straightforward. So we've been doing a number of things around this. We've been to have a look at Christ College, which is a porter cabin building, went up about 15 years ago, just to see how that one's holding up. And Bewdley is the school below it, which we looked at maybe 15, 18 years ago, before the Newbridge project. We've had discussions directly with contractors to understand their approach, and this is volumetric offsite contractors. And we've widened and put out an expression of interest, which closed a week ago now, inviting contractors to come and talk to the authority with their approach to MMC and what they could bring to bear. So we're in the process of understanding those initial returns and how we can engage with the market on that basis. One of the most interesting conversations we've had is with the framework manager from the DFE, who's managing the MMC1 framework. And this is 4th or 5th iteration of the DFE's offsite framework. It's a very well considered pack of information, which includes very robust performance standards. And we're exploring whether we can make use of those performance standards, whether we can make use of the framework, which will have challenges. Now, the final note on there points towards there will not be another MMC framework from the DFE. They are having one single framework that has a requirement for any contractor delivering school buildings within that to achieve a threshold of offsite construction. So the pre-manufactured value needs to be 50% or more from mainstream contracting. So the Westminster government is looking to drive factory delivery, the industrialization of school buildings via this mechanism. So there is no framework current. This is likely to be what comes out in November. It's not of use to us, but it's interesting. That's how the market's going. So the driver for this is looking at Golwg Pen y Fan. We developed a scheme with external designers, the external design team. And to my mind, this is a very lean scheme. It's doing exactly what I think a school in 2025 should be doing. It's low energy. It's very simply organized. It's been designed in conjunction with school service colleagues. There's a 2-story central street within it. There's community facilities on the north of the building. There's a lot of detail there. The point of putting this up there is because it's very easy to make volumetric. So if you wanted to build it as pods and deliver it, this is one supplier's approach to demonstrate how well aligned it is. The the building as designed, Penavon as designed, could be delivered in a number of ways, including volumetric, with the exception of the hall. So the pink area up towards the top there, you'll see on the right hand side, that would be on an on-site element, but the majority of the remainder of the building would be delivered off-site. Now, rather interesting, if you remember the image I showed earlier of the 13th floor of the block of flats with those little the blocks being craned in, they're all the same, or there are very few within a sort of pattern choice there. You'll see from the looking across how the school breaks down there. Most of those units are different, and so volumetric's possible. It's not necessarily delivering the economies that might, be thought of as a headline. So I've got a couple of pages of comparisons, and then just draw to a conclusion, just to indicate the what this could be delivered into sort of a risk profile, looking at how we're delivering against the various aspects that of concern to the authority. So traditional D&B is what we've been doing for a number of years. I said that's not been working desperately well in recent years, but we had a good run at it beforehand. Environmental performance, we can achieve a good standard, including passive house, including net zero carbon, whichever route we go. In terms of capital cost certainty, MMC is marginally better suited to a single stage tender. The suppliers know their product well, they've got good control of their supply chains, so that's likely to be borne out as greater cost certainty within MMC, which isn't to say necessarily cheaper. Ability to manage variations is much more easily accommodated within the traditional D&B route. There are often changes made on site. That's very, very difficult within volumetric offsite in particular. Running costs are likely to be very similar. MMC is again, is a product that we're buying rather than the one-off, but the modelling that goes within the one-offs nowadays means that the performance gap is less than previously. The solvency considerations are important. We've had previous projects where the main contractor has become insolvent halfway through a build, and we've been able to retender, and other contractors come in to complete that. Now, with individual contractors within an MMC offering a particularly bespoke solution, other contractors may not be able to add on to a partially completed building. So that's that unique solution is something to bear in mind. The program is shorter with MMC. It's probably not as much shorter as people might wish, because the statutory process is identical. We've got to go through the same planning, the same ecology, and so on. Quality control, there's an implication there. Within traditional design and build, the focus is on site inspections. Within MMC, you've got the site inspection, but also you're inspecting on a remote factory. So understanding how that takes place is going to be a challenge, or it's an issue to resolve. Interim payments, we're paying on site usually for works that have been completed, whereas on MMC you're maybe paying up front for units vested within a factory some distance away. And local spend is likely to be a significant challenge within this. Within traditional, we have a very good opportunity to achieve Welsh spend. That's likely to be much reduced by using volumetric offsite in particular, or high level MMC. Matt, I'll introduce you in just a minute. I'll just rattle through this last page if that's okay. But I think it's important to remember traditional and MMC are not quite opposites. Any building that we're doing nowadays will have elements of modern methods of construction within it. It's the extent to which that occurs, and I'd question whether MMC as an aim in itself is the right way to go, but it's certainly a consideration of demonstrating value for money. The scheme for Penavon has been prepared efficiently. We can build it using any type of construction technology we choose, and what we're doing at the moment is testing the market to help inform the route to that cost-effective solution. And against this is, I've got a calendar there and down there, but there are other projects that will follow this that are very similar. So we want to be taking those learning points and the understanding of that procurement route onto the broader and the continuing program. And the final bit I'm going to just raise here as an introduction for Matt's thoughts, really, around the requirement for that engagement with Welsh Government, because this is going to have it'd be of great interest to them, depending on how Powys decides to go. So, Chair, I'll pass on to Matt at this point.
Diolch, Jim, and Prynhawn da, Chair and committee members. Just to briefly introduce myself, my name is Matt Curtis, and I joined Powys just last month, and I'm on as a comment from Welsh Government. So when I was in Welsh Government, I looked after the delivery of the wider Sustainable Communities for Learning programme across Wales. So I think just wanted to add a bit of flavour from a kind of specifically the Schools Education Capital programme and how this might be affected in terms of the key risks, challenges and opportunities from this piece of work. Firstly, I think a really exciting piece of work, and I think it's really important that we are challenging the status quo within the construction industry. It's a really challenging climate at the moment, and we do need to be trying new innovative ideas to kind of make sure that we keep things fresh and exploring value for money. I think just the first thing I suppose for me to flag is a lot of the challenges that we are experiencing are being experienced by other local authorities across Wales, and our voice is stronger together than alone. So we have set up a survey with other local authorities. We've already had 5 respond to it, and all 5 of those have is saying that they're experiencing similar challenges to us and want to work collaboratively on overcoming those and exploring models like modern methods of construction. So that's really encouraging, and I think that number will grow now that half term is out the way. Secondly, we need, as Jim mentioned, we need to work very closely with the Welsh Government on this. They are a major stakeholder in our projects. You know, they fund around about 70% of the education projects. Firstly, we need to be very, very sure that we can meet all of the conditions of our funding in terms of net zero carbon, acoustics, all of those technical things that are conditions of Welsh Government funding. But also need to challenge Welsh Government on some of the challenges that we're all experiencing as local authorities in delivering projects, and what support is there to look at the regional frameworks and how we can kind of improve procurement and value for money across the programme, not just via modern methods of construction. I think just to be clear on the key risks that we're kind of coming across and having to mitigate here, essentially, firstly, we need to make sure that we can identify a suitable procurement route. We haven't found that just yet. And we, you know, if we go down this route, we need to make sure that that is there and available to us, that meets funding conditions, so we can pull down Welsh Government funding. The insolvency risk is quite a significant one to flag through this committee. You know, a lot of these solutions through volumetric and modern methods of construction are kind of copyrighted solutions. So if there is an issue of insolvency, that can happen obviously in a traditional design and build, but you can get somebody more easily to come in and continue capital works through a traditional design and build route, rather than having to essentially start again because half of the school that you've paid for is somewhere in a factory somewhere. And Welsh Government will be very much keen on kind of exploring that risk with us, I believe. I think another one to flag and discuss with Welsh Government is that return on investment. We don't really have a provider in Wales at the moment that can do that off-site construction. So we would be looking at somewhere like Coventry, where they have those kind of factories in place. So we need to link in with Welsh Government in terms of the economy strategy and how we can look at that resilience within Wales, because a big part of this programme that we have in the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme is reinvesting our money, our public finances, into the local economy, into our workforce, into keeping that local economy going. So that's going to be an interesting discussion. And then, sorry, the final one for me is, you know, from my perspective in terms of joining Powys, we have a very ambitious work programme in place for phase 2 of the Transforming Education Agenda, some really big, truly transformational projects that we want to see going forward, and pace is really important right now to kind of get those projects going. So whilst modern methods of construction is great and we need to carry on with this discussion and work it through, we also need to make sure that we are keeping all options open as we're moving through so we can maintain that pace. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Jim, and thank you, Matthew, for your presentations. That's absolutely fascinating, and thank you for bringing that work to this committee at this stage in its development. We do really appreciate it. I've got hands up already. I can see Councillor Williams, so I'll go to Councillor William first, and then John.
Diolch Cadeirydd, and thanks to Jim and to Matt for their sort of complimentary presentations, really, flagging up some significant opportunities. But I think both of you, particularly latterly, Matt in his comments, sort of also indicating one or two areas that were of concern to me in listening to the presentation. One is well, clearly the insolvency matter is a matter of great significance, because if you've got major sort of tie-in with a concern that hits financial difficulties and then is in some sort of industrial state somewhere in another country that is not accessible, you're then in difficulties. But more philosophically, really, the whole issue about the value, the social value of the contracts and making the Welsh pound, the Powys pound, the Welsh pound work for the greater good, because we've got a somewhat fragile economy in a number of respects, and this is an investment where 70% clearly come from Welsh government, 30% from monies derived more locally, and there is an issue there that I think we need to take on board and think about and to proceed with caution. My specific question is, to what extent does the both approaches allow for learning points from the snagging process of recent years' phases of construction? I had some involvement in the margins of the Ystrygynlais. Most of that were in campus reviews years ago. Much more recently, in the context of the builds that were completed in the Gwynafyd catchment area in the round of openings in 2018, there's quite a lot of intelligence that will have been fed back from school leaders and governing bodies in relation to the snagging experience. To which of these routes is more favourable to taking on board those learning points? I think that's really important. And a final sort of sub area of concern is around the ability to work with the grain and the expectation not just of Welsh government, but also of local planning authorities that may wish particular aspects to be reflected in more sensitive settings. And obviously Powys has got two planning authorities, both try to set the highest standards. One is our own Powys, and the other, of course, is the Bannybrycheiniog National Park, which isn't always known for its flexibility, although it seems in school builds to have been more pragmatic than in some other areas of its activity. But that's another debate. Thank you very much. And if you could address those couple of points, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor William. Jim, if you Jim and or Matt, and then I'll bring John in after.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the question, Councillor Powell. So our designs, first off, followed an evolution, and you'll be aware of some of these. You mentioned some of those jobs. We always review the jobs that have gone previously to inform the ones that come along, because the environment that we're building in changes. Statutory requirements change, education curriculum changes, and so on. So the design that we have now follows and it has evolved from the schools that recently delivered in Welshpool. So we've taken the learning points from those, what's worked well, what we can improve on, and we've drawn those into the general arrangements, and that's only a concept design. In terms of the snagging, that's a more interesting thing. I mean, and that's not one that we've got to that level of detail yet within the delivery of these projects. So it's contingent upon that quality control, and it's approached differently within that, with a high level of off-site manufacturing than it is on-site. That's the key point. So one of the attractions for us being able to use the quality standards within something like the DFE suite of documents, or the Welsh equivalent, is that we can baseline a good standard there to help address some of the snagging issues. But it needs to be addressed. It needs to be factory based rather than site based. Matt, would anything to add on that?
The only thing I wanted to add is that the Welsh Government Sustainable Communities for Learning programme is launching a new suite of design standards for school projects to be delivered across Wales, which is Welsh specific rather than using UK guidance. And that is based on workshops with leads like Jim across Wales in terms of pooling that lessons learned and that snagging of what is a Welsh school and how do we support communities. That will tweak and be flexible to local needs, but you know, that footprint is there.
I think just add to that, Matt, it's Welsh leads, including Jim on this one. Sorry, Councillor Powell, the other bit you mentioned was in terms of the planning environment. We're to an extent, it's about the surface treatment you put on the exterior of the building, but we've modelled that in a variety of ways to get an appropriate sense of scale, and we've had those initial conversations with the national parks again, so that we've got a good degree of confidence at the moment that the solution as designed can be delivered without major change, irrespective of that construction technology that's behind the exterior.
Yeah, I'm grateful to you both for that. Also, I've recently had particularly positive feedback from some environment educators with whom I think, Jim, you've had some dialogue. Nature's Child, which is locally based consultancy that's valued your responsiveness in relation to some of the issues in relation to environmental education. I'll put that on the record. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor William. Thanks. John.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, very interesting presentation. Thank you very much. There's nothing new, I don't think, in terms of prefabricated construction. I remember as a child walking around the streets of Paddington, which have recently been bombed, with prefabricated buildings being put up to replace the tenements that were, obliterated by Hitler. But the thing about them was that they were all the same, absolutely identical. So, and I'm just wondering if, are you trying in the case of Pen y Fan to fit prefabrication into your design, or comparing a prefabrication design with a standardized build for that purpose? In other words, are we making the best use of standardized units, and which would then be most economic? So I hope I've explained myself.
Thank you, John. Chair, I'm going to respond. Thank you. Yeah, and that's the crux of the issue we're challenged with at the moment, John. It's what the right balance is, what that effective spending is, because we could put a very reductive design against this, and it be a series of boxes. That's irrespective of the planning challenge, which is. But the planning challenge is around the exterior. It's not around the internal teaching environment, which is so much about the quality of the school. And Matt will probably provide a Welsh Government view on this as well. But it's achieving the right quality standard. So, for example, within the design as it stands at the moment, there's a 2-story street within the building, which is open. It has got voids within there. Now, it'd be a simpler and a cheaper thing for those voids not to be there. Require additional ventilation, but the ambience in there would be poorer, I think. So we're trying to, good design works on a number of levels. If it's providing light and ventilation and connection and a sense of place, then it's arguably working well. So I'm sorry, I'm not sure I'm quite answering your question, John, but it's.
Well, I was just wondering. I mean, you've got an hour design for Pen y Fan, and you've is that design then transferable to other projects that we've got coming up? With minor adaptations rather than completely back to the drawing board and start again.
Well, that's the intention. We're looking to move on to the next school we've got, which is in Newtown, which is a very similar brief, and looking to apply the same approach there and to develop the A power standard from that. So again, this is all about shortening the process and simplifying it.
I could also just come in on that point. I think in terms of volumetric, as Jim said right at the beginning, there's modern methods of construction, there's a broad range, isn't it? Schools in themselves aren't your ideal building to deliver through a volumetric. You're not going to get the full suite of savings available through a volumetric solution, as you would maybe if you were doing something like student accommodation, where they are very, very replicable. It's exactly the same kind of unit being put in over and over again. So it is a little bit of a, like with everything, it's a balance between fitting the design to the solution and the solution to the design and how far you go. Because ultimately, we've always got to remember that schools are very high performing technical buildings that need to house 200 potentially plus students for long periods of time. So they do have very strong thermal performance, good ventilation, and all those things. And that's without all of the kind of climate additional things on there in terms of achieving net zero carbon. So I think to make the point around value for money, a school will never, I don't think, get the full absolute savings that you could get associated with a volumetric solution. It's going to be finding that sweet balance between quality and saving, as value often is about.
Thanks. Very interesting.
I'm going to give the last question on this item to Councillor Gareth, and then I'll draw this item to a close. Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's really interesting to listen to. I think obviously just for me, just thinking of the bigger picture related to schools, and within Hay, we had the community building that was promised within there. So obviously a one case for fit for all doesn't necessarily work. Do your plans or the savings, is there other works the council could be doing around sports and other parts around there that actually will produce savings for other parts of the county? I just think it's one of those, a little bit concerned sometimes we chase a figure within a section where actually there's other parts of the council, like leisure for a prime example, and 3G pitches and stuff like that. Actually, they incorporated may put a small little bit of cost on the school, but actually the savings are a lot far wider. I'm just wondering, do we take that into consideration?
Do you want me to come in on that one around what services we, am I right, sorry, Councillor Gareth, in terms of the question is around what supplementary services we might include within a redevelopment, such as including leisure facilities rather than the actual school itself?
Yes, yeah, because obviously they're going to impact on the school design as well, possibly, and everything else like that. Obviously could put extra cost on there. So if we look at schools, and I put a question in today around 3G pitches, well, actually schools are prime location for those kind of services that we can actually deliver within the communities, which will be more the health benefits, the community benefits as well, but obviously it does impact the cost of the school. And I think we need to look at the broad impact and not badge it all into savings for schools.
Absolutely, and I think that's the key in terms of that balance between design, meeting the design, and the other way around in terms of what we want to make sure is we have complete flexibility within our school designs going forward to add in whatever services we feel that need fit for that particular site. So I don't think that the going down of modern methods of construction route would affect this at all, but to provide you with some comfort in terms of how we take projects forward, we'll be challenged through the 3-stage business case process through the Welsh Government to demonstrate what we're doing with individual school sites and investments to support the local community, that be through sport, co-location of services, all those sorts of things, and colleagues from leisure and other areas of the local authority sit on our Transforming Education Board to help with that mapping exercise to identify what is needed through development. Obviously, the challenge ultimately always comes down to we need to find our 35% contribution to any education facilities, and any non-education facilities, we would have to explore alternative funding routes outside of the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jim and Matthew, for your presentation. As you rightly identify, this committee has got a keen interest in value for money being provided across the local authority, and we have a keen interest in process assurance and procurement. So it was very pertinent to our business and to be more aware of what is being planned and the potential in this space. I'd like to just sort of share with you and colleagues that the Governance and Audit Committee had previously had a capital working group, which in recent weeks we have decided to re-establish. And our capital working group is being re-established under the chairmanship of one of the other lay members, Gareth Hall, who unfortunately isn't with us today, and he tendered late apologies, which Carrie Ann, if you would record Gareth's apologies. But we're reconstituting our capital working group under Gareth's chairmanship, and I won't go into the detail, but Gareth has got a very strong and long career, which makes him a particularly pertinent chair for this work. So I'm sure the committee's ongoing interest in this can and probably will be pursued through Gareth's working group, which he's reconstituting now. So I would just say to members of Governance and Audit Committee, if any of you would be willing to sit on Gareth's working group, please let Kath and Carrie Ann or Gareth know. But we continue to. Thank you very much for bringing your presentation, and we'll maintain our interest, and in particular all likelihood via the capital working group. So thank you very much for that. I'll move the committee on to agenda item 8, which is the corporate complaints policy. And as usual, Helen, you're very welcome to our meeting, and Helen will briefly introduce her paper, and then I'll open for any comments or considerations from the committee. Helen.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm Helen Dolman. I'm the Senior Manager for Customer Services and Information Governance. This paper is purely in relation to the corporate complaints policy review. As the paper indicates, a further report will be brought to Governance and Audit at a later date, detailing our examination of the complaints and the lessons learned, and that will be reported separately. So I just wanted to make it clear that it's just purely the policy at this stage, and it is a review of the policy that we currently have in place. Quite simply, we've just made a few changes to the policy that we felt were required to update it and to clarify, those being that the corporate complaints policy doesn't cover complaints about requests made under the information request regimes of freedom of information and environmental information regulations or data protection complaints. No social services complaints, those are all dealt with under separate pieces of legislation, and so separate policies are in place in relation to those. We wanted to update contact details, obviously, for the public, and not just contact details for the council, but for other organisations they could get in touch with. Provide the link to where the public can make their complaints, even though that's obviously public at the moment, and it has been a long-standing web link, and we just wanted to include it in the policy. Clarification over investigating officers may needing to seek clarification over what is being complained about and how that will affect timescales, etc. How we escalate to stage 2 and an explanation of that, and the removal of reference to senior leadership team considering replates on a quarterly basis. So those are the matters that we've cleared up in that report, in that policy. I would probably guess that somebody's probably going to ask about why have we removed the reference to senior leadership considering the complaints on a quarterly basis. Quite simply, I felt that until we were in a position where we could evidence that that was happening, then it's probably best not to sit in a published policy for the public, that happens, and potentially is happening in some places, But I think, obviously being the IG manager, freedom of information requests are received. So if we were to receive a freedom of request, I'd want to be quite comfortable that we could deliver on that request if that was made. So if at some point at a later date we need to put that reference back in, that's quite easy to do into another review of the policy. So that's my explanation for the removal of that. The report refers to the resource implications in dealing with our corporate complaints, which is dealt with through the customer services team in the majority of the management, and the reporting of customer services complaints, but the investigating and the responding is undertaken by the relevant service areas. And that is pretty much a quick run through of the review into the policy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Helen. And the committee's asked to note the policy and its changes. Are there any questions or comments that any colleagues would? Pete, Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, and thank you for that, Helen. And as you were running through the report there, you mentioned that there's listed, I think it's in section 2 of the policy, some like freedom of information where there's separate legislations and things like that. I was going to ask that you may want to consider making a reference to whistleblowing and the separate whistleblowing policy that we have to make sure that both the complainant and the whistleblower know in which policy direction to go. And I just wanted to ask as well as whether there could be perhaps a cross-read, because whilst both sort of are separate legislations and deal with separate things, there are quite a few messages in terms of how we deal with it that are fairly similar. So it could be worth a cross-read as well if that's not already been done. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Helen?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Lewington. Yes, that seems quite reasonable to make an additional insertion into that area of the policy, just further clarifications for the public and potentially staff as to which policy they need to be looking at, and we can pick out any relevant and themes from both policies in that area, and it would sit quite nicely with the rest of it then.
Lovely. Thank you, Helen.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks, Helen, and thanks, Councillor Pete, for your question. That seems a very pragmatic response, Helen. So thank you very much for that. Anything else for Helen on the complaints policy? Or are we content to note?
Can I just,
Helen? Yeah.
Sorry, just add, Chair. Sorry. That in the paper that will be coming through at a later date, then that's where we will be bringing reference into how we deal with corporate complaints and the handling of those, and how those responses then build into the customer experience framework and the sustainable powers work that we're currently doing, so trying to bring those threads together. So I'll be looking to bring those into that report rather than this one. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Helen. Thanks a lot for that clarification. I'll move the committee on to agenda item 9, which is simply oral reports on 2 of our working groups, internal audit and whistleblowing. I'm just actually going to check, is Ian Halstead with us today?
No, Chair, he isn't.
We probably ought to record his apologies as well then.
Yeah, I'll make a note.
I don't think we did. Okay, so internal audit working group. John chaired the last meeting of the committee. I've got a couple of comments, but John, is there anything you'd like to say about the last meeting which you were able to chair? I think John might just have stepped out. I have watched the recording of the meeting, which I was unable to attend. So the committee reviewed audit board reports and the performance of the conduct and progress in the audit jobs and in management reporting and responding to the audit reports. And had quite a detailed conversation around that. I think and broadly agreed, John, that some tightening up and some improvement was needed in the way that the audits are audit performance reporting is undertaken, and in the timeliness and reporting of management actions. But John, you were chairing the meeting. What was your view on where we were getting to?
Yes, indeed, you're absolutely right. There were some actions I felt we needed to accelerate very much so on there, and there were one or two points as well. I'm sorry, I spoke with my microphone off and camera off before.
Sorry, John.
I do apologise, but I was chatting away merrily. But there were one or two points where I deferred action to the next meeting because you were absent, and I felt it more appropriate because you'd had conversations with Jane about terms of reference and so on. So that aside, yes, that was the main thrust of the meeting. I think, getting on with some of the recommendations.
Yeah, thank you very much, John. And that was certainly my sense from watching the recording. John alluded to a couple of items that are on my mind for further discussion in that working group. And one of the things I'd like to discuss, and I've opened up a discussion with Jane as lead senior officer in this space, is to perhaps change the reporting approach and to have two reports, one report from our SWAP colleagues on performance against their programme of work, and a second report which comes from officers on the progress and performance of officers and teams in responding to audit recommendations. For me, those are two quite distinct things, and at the moment they're all bundled into one report from SWAP, and so we're exploring the merit of perhaps separating them out, which I would hope would drive greater levels of accountability and responsiveness. But it's an ongoing conversation which will continue in the working group. But this is really just a report on what we're doing. And on whistleblowing, I will ask Pete as our whistleblowing chair to comment. But from me as chair of Governance and Audit Committee, I'd like to thank Councillor Pete for chairing the whistleblowing working group. Certainly I was a member, and I think that the group and its work has made a significant contribution to process and communication of process. And we had, for the record, I think we had excellent engagement from both legal services officers and HR officers, and I certainly was very grateful for that. But Pete, I'm very grateful to Pete for his chairmanship, but I'll give Pete the last word on that because it was his group.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for your very kind words, and I'll probably just leave it there, actually. No, we met on 12th of February, and it was agreed that the working group had concluded its work. As you said, all members agreed that the working group had been positively and constructively supported by officers. So I'd add my thanks to yours for the officers there. We are now just finalising the reports to be tabled at the next Governance and Audit meeting on 27th of this month. And that will include outcomes of our work, recommendations, and proposed future actions to be added to the work programme.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Pete. Thank you very much. And you just referenced the work programme, so I'll move us on to agenda item 10, which is our work programme. This detailed list of our work programme in connection with our next two meetings, the 27th of March and the 8th of May. And there is obviously a more comprehensive and longer term work programme available, but Carrie-Anne has provided this for our next two meetings. If anyone has any comments or questions in connection with the agendas for our next two meetings. No. I've also just received a message in connection with the publication of the Eston review of our services, and it will actually be published in the public domain on the 28th of March, not the 21st of March as previously advertised. So if anyone's looking for that, it'll be the last Friday. Jane, did you have anything to add?
27th, not the 28th.
27th. Oh, so sorry. It's not the Friday, it's the Thursday. Yeah, so the last Thursday in the month, the Eston report will be publicly available, the 27th of March. Thank you very much. So if there are no further points or questions, I will thank all members and officers for their attendance today. I also thank all the teams who have contributed to papers who may have not been in attendance today, and thank everyone for the hard work that goes into creating these meetings. And I will move to close the meeting with my thanks. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Meeting is closed.